Thank you for joining us. This is Clinical Conversations podcast number 135. We're part of Journal Watch, which seeks out practice-changing research for clinicians. Its website is jwatch.org. I'm Joe Elia. Joining me is co-host Dr. Danielle Schurer of the Medical University of South Carolina. Our guest this time is the first author of a paper describing a protective effect of quadrivalent human papillomavirus vaccine against anal intraepithelial neoplasias and possibly anal cancer in men who have sex with men. The paper appears in the October 27th New England Journal of Medicine and describes a vaccine efficacy of near 80% against the viruses most commonly causing intraepithelial neoplasia and about 55% against other virus types not in the vaccine. Our guest, Dr. Joel Palefsky, is in the Department of Medicine at the University of California at San Francisco. Thanks for agreeing to talk with us, Dr. Palefsky.
My pleasure.
The efficacy numbers I mentioned earlier are for subjects who received all 3 shots, but the efficacy dropped quickly among those who didn't. How often does that situation arise in multi-dose vaccines in your experience?
The data in the paper actually lumped together everyone into the so-called intent-to-treat population, or ITT, who didn't follow or were not eligible for the per-protocol population, which were the data that you presented first. Mm-hmm. So that puts together people not only who didn't receive all 3 shots, but also who may have been previously exposed to some of the HPV types in the vaccine.
Okay.
This is a preventive vaccine. If you've been exposed to, say, HPV-6 previously and you get the vaccine, you will not get benefit from protection against HPV-6. You might against the other 3 types in the vaccine, which are 11, 16, and 18. So what you said is correct, that the efficacy did decline, but some of that was due to prior exposure because the study population, in fact, was required to have initiated sexual activity already. Having said that, it is also true that in the real-world setting, it is not at all uncommon for people to initiate vaccination and not complete it. That wasn't very common in this study because it was a rarefied study setting. So most of that decline that you referred to really was more due to prior exposure rather than incomplete vaccination.
And in that same vein, the cohort that you studied was relatively young. The males were 16 to 26.
Yeah, they were, but they also had to have already initiated sexual activity to get into the study. And furthermore, and this made it a very challenging proposition, they were required to have at least 1 male sexual encounter, but no more than 5 lifetime male or female partners combined.
And what was the purpose of having the upper limit of 5?
The purpose was to have a population in which we had the opportunity to demonstrate efficacy.
Okay. Presumably not exposed to every single serotype.
Right. We wanted that so-called sweet spot where...
Yeah. So realistic, but...
Realistic, and also people who were likely to have exposures going forward, because on the one hand, we didn't want too much exposure, so we could demonstrate efficacy. On the other hand, if they weren't getting exposed at all, we also couldn't demonstrate efficacy in the placebo group.
And then in your discussion section, you talk a little bit about herd immunity. Can you elaborate a little bit more about how vaccinating women and heterosexual men fit into this equation?
Well, particularly at the younger ages, sexuality is more fluid than as we grow older. Boys often, in fact, experiment with girls before they determine ultimately that they may be more interested in same-sex relationships. Mm-hmm. And so the herd immunity that we refer to reflects the fact that people who will turn out to be MSM, men who have sex with men, are often a bridge population to women. Mm-hmm. They often get the virus from women in their first exposure. And the more people in general in the population who you vaccinate, the better protected everyone else who isn't will be.
What was your reaction to the CDC Advisory Committee that recommended earlier this week that 11 and 12-year-old boys receive the vaccine?
I thought that was a fantastic move forward. That is the ideal time to vaccinate because most will not have initiated sexual activity by that time, mm-hmm. and that means they will derive maximum benefit from the vaccine. They did also approve routine vaccination in a catch-up for boys up to the age of 21, mm-hmm. which is also a step forward. I think my only minor disappointment was that they didn't extend it through 26, primarily from an operational standpoint, because now the recommendation is a little bit different between men and women. And I would prefer if clinicians didn't have to think first, okay, is it boys, is it girls, is it 21, is it 26?
Yeah.
Because for women, it's up to age 26.
As we're all aware, the vaccine campaign for girls has been fraught with lots of misunderstandings and missteps. And
Yes,
I think primarily because it does involve, either directly or indirectly, a discussion about sexuality in a very young age group.
Well, it need not necessarily. Again, the ideal target age for both genders is 11 to 12 years old.
Uh-huh.
And the conversation then primarily happens between the physician or provider and the parent who's making the decision. In terms of communicating with the young person, I think it suffices to tell them the essential truth, which is that this is meant to be a vaccine that will reduce your risk of getting some forms of cancer someday. And it need not stray into that arena. It's an adult's problem.
It is. But certainly I'm sure there's parents out there, as we've seen with the vaccination campaign for girls, that are even uncomfortable with the idea of them becoming sexually active.
That's
and it
correct.
seems like some are just unwilling to even have that discussion, which is
Yeah.
unfortunate.
It is very unfortunate. I feel they're
because it's
doing
cancer prevention. It's not.
That's correct. And furthermore, the irony is that not only are they not getting the benefit of that cancer prevention, but they're also potentially not benefiting from prevention of other forms of cancer which aren't as clearly identified as sexually transmitted, such as oral cancer. We don't have the direct evidence that the vaccine does so, but now with the new evidence that we can prevent anal HPV infection, we know that the vaccine works to prevent infection at a mucosal surface other than, or in addition to the cervix, and there's a good chance it would work in the mouth too. And oral cancer is a very hot topic right now in the general population. Its incidence appears to be growing. So I think parents should really consider this very, very carefully before they let their agenda get in the way.
What about clinicians? You talked a little bit about parents changing their attitudes about this, but what about clinicians? How might we help them think about HPV vaccine in a way that they thought, well, it's for adolescent girls now, and do they need convincing, do you think, for them to start initiating some of these conversations, and how should they be thinking differently about it as a result of your research and the things that came out, say, in the past couple of weeks?
Well, you have several very important questions there, and I would say firstly that clinicians are an essential part of this chain, and some of the reluctance to vaccinate, I think, also emanates from communication from the clinician directly or indirectly. In some cases, the clinicians aren't aware that the vaccine is available and or useful and or safe. In others, they feel uncomfortable bringing it up with the parents because they perhaps project what their own feelings onto this. So I think that clinicians also need to be fully educated around this and bring it up whenever possible to parents of children who are eligible for the vaccine. I think the events of the last week magnify that because they used to only have to deal with this issue when they were dealing with parents of girls, but now it is a routine vaccination. It will appear for boys, it will appear on the schedule, and I think there is simply very little way of avoiding the conversation, and that's a good thing.
Is there a resource that you point colleagues to that gives a good background for them about the vaccine and about the benefits?
Yeah, my favorite resource is one that's put out by the CDC. If you go to their sexually transmitted diseases web links, there's information about the vaccine. There is no commercial involvement in that. It is totally fact-based, and that is my favorite one. And there's also information for patients on that website.
So it's the CDC's STD information website.
Yes.
Do you have any further advice to offer, Dr. Palefsky?
I think the HPV vaccine represents one of the major medical advances we have had in the last few decades, I think, as far as cancer prevention is concerned. And I strongly urge parents to consider it for their children before they become sexually active in the target age group of 11 to 12. They and their tax dollars have paid for the research that went into some of the basic science behind this and the vaccine development, and it would seem a real shame if we were having to take care of problems that arose in their children as a result of not being vaccinated when they could have been.
Dr. Palefsky, thank you so much again for talking with us today. And it's early out there on the coast, earlier than it is here. So thank you again.
My pleasure. Nice talking to you.
That was our 135th edition. Earlier podcasts are available at podcasts.jwatch.org. Clinical Conversations executive producer is Ador Yano. I'm Joe Elia. Join us next time. For myself and Dr. Danielle Schurer, thanks so much for listening.